Now, WeHeart Seattle's Andrea Suarez is being investigated by the state. Labor and Industries is looking into alleged improper collection or disposal of the drug needles that she picks up, the used foil, and other debris collected off of sidewalks and out of city parks. Mind you, this is the same drug paraphernalia that Seattle King County Public Health and other public health agencies across the state actually give to drug addicts so that they have clean needles, so that they have clean foil, so that they have tourniquets for their arms, so that they have Narcan should they overdose or need to save another fellow drug addict in an overdose. But nonetheless, the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, OSHA, opened a case against Andrea late last month. And they gave her at the time just 2 days to produce a bunch of safety documents that they wanted. So here was We Heart Seattle's video post on X, which caught our attention.
Somebody has taken the time to report WeHeart Seattle for improper handling and collection of hypodermic needles and fentanyl paraphernalia, and the state of Washington has served me paperwork. I am under investigation for improper handling of drug paraphernalia in the city of Seattle. I have to provide accident prevention program, training materials for bloodborne pathogens, training logs, safety meeting minutes. We come out here as volunteers and do a service to the city, and I'm supposed to now produce disciplinary records?
Now, if in fact this is your first, entry into learning what We Heart Seattle does, and Andrea Suarez, the founder of We Heart Seattle, it's basically her and then two part-time employees. Everything else is just volunteers. They have something like 75,000 volunteer hours out there cleaning up more than 2 million pounds of garbage out of our parks and off of sidewalks in the green belts going back to 2020. And they take no money from the state. They're entirely funded off of donations. And they also help people get off the streets and into recovery. And in fact, the two part-time employees that she has now are former drug addicts, also were incarcerated, got out. Now she's employing them to basically help rescue other people off the streets. There's nothing like, the story of a recovered addict, recovered someone out of incarceration to potentially convince somebody else that it's that their life has value and that it's worth the fight. So she has rejected the low barrier, no barrier housing first model that has been promoted in this state for quite some time. So here's part of my conversation with Andrea yesterday.
Does this harm the people we're all trying to help when you slow down an agency that's out there on the ground, not just picking up hypodermic needles and paraphernalia of all kinds? I mean, it's not just fentanyl foil, but cookers, used Narcan cartridges, vials of Narcan, tourniquets, used alcohol pad wipes, bloody gauze strips, poop, barf, urine filled bottles that lay strewn all over our shared spaces. And, somehow I'm in trouble because somebody claimed that I improperly picked these up. And that is an egregious overreach. The state should have looked at this as a much bigger lens and went, let's see, one employee, bunch of volunteers, kind of has an activist vibe to the organization. Maybe this isn't a tree we need to bark up. Look, I'm all about safety, proper separation of needles and foil, gloves, pinchers, vests, masks, goggles, whatever anybody wants to wear. Volunteer by definition means by choice, so those folks out there doing this work, do it on their own, and we have waivers. But as an employee, I understand we have, labor and industries to report to. I'm not even sure a one employee organization has to do anything. But I certainly don't have disciplinary records on hand for me to file them, or my hepatitis shot protocol, or the woman investigating me said, well, I need to walk around, your office and, your operation. I go, well, that would be the park. And you're more than welcome to come out to the park and step on foil and needles and Narcan and poop with me.
So we don't know who the named individual is who filed this complaint with Labor and Industries. It is publicly available information. We're already seeking that. But Andrea said no matter to her, she's convinced it was not one of her employees or a former volunteer or someone like that. Who knows? But at this point, she doesn't really care. She said every time somebody comes at her, it just makes her stronger, and it oftentimes increases donations to her organization.
We are going into our seventh year come this fall. And we've picked up millions of pounds of trash, hundreds of thousands of pieces of needles and other drug paraphernalia. And thank God we, you know, are safe, and don't have any kind of record where we're running people off into the ER room because they've, stepped on something sharp and dangerous. And I expect everybody to, go to the doctor and sign a waiver that says they've got their proper shots and immunizations if they believe in them and everything else. So um, but yeah, it's the overreach, like the big government picking on the little one woman operation that has organized 75,000 hours of volunteers, and we look like a multi-million dollar organization because of what we do, and because we do make a nickel scream, and because we don't have red tape and bureaucracy that slow us down. We're so effective. So um I was asked earlier if I think that maybe one of the temporary workers, or, one of somebody, legitimately turned us in. And I said, not with any bone of my body do I think somebody that's a regular with us. I mean, we have a very small team. That's the whole point. And say, hey guys, is there any issues today? Anything we can improve on with, we did add a couple more people to go get the bloodborne pathogen training for $40. I mean, gosh, I think every single human being walking through the streets of Seattle should probably get a bloodborne pathogen certificate on how to handle, what's out here right now. Narcan cartridges and vials full of medicine to reverse overdoses. And this is the biggest kicker for anybody listening that doesn't know this. Our county Department of Health hands out the foil, the cookers, the tourniquets, the needles, and everything that we're trying to do to clean this up. They are handing it out with nothing inside that kit on where to dispose your used needle or your used foil. It just ends up on the ground like another piece of litter, So I am going to file an L&I claim against a lot of people today in the next 48 hours
Okay.
because we need to raise the bar. And there's a lot of people out there picking up needles and foils. And if I'm doing it wrong, maybe everybody else is too. And let's improve the system and make it safer for all.
I did receive a response back from Labor and Industries and Matt Ross. He emailed this to my question about the complaint. We'll put this up. He says any organization using employees to handle used sharps, the needles, is required to follow the same set of basic rules to protect their workers. Generally speaking, they must have documented programs for accident prevention, documented program for preventing exposure to bloodborne pathogens. And Andrea says they all do that, and workers who have access to and use personal protective equipment appropriate to the work. Now, we'll see what comes of all this. Of course, with the hundreds, it's probably thousands of volunteers that have helped her out over the years. There might have been a volunteer that didn't go through the safety protocols required before they went out to help clean up the drugs and the paraphernalia. But again, these are volunteers. So whether or not Andrea would have had to put them through some kind of training before they went out, other than just give them, a quick what's for before they go out. Here's how to be safe. Here's your gloves. That remains to be seen. So where this goes remains to be seen. It's kind of like with the PDC complaint. We're not really sure what sort of enforcement mechanism will be on the other end. There could be some fines levied against WeHeart Seattle. We don't know. They could also just say, this is our expectation for how you adjust your protocols internally. Okay, now a new poll is out from Change Washington asking people what they think about Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, her job performance. And it seems to indicate there may be some growing dissatisfaction just months into her first year in office, with two-thirds of voters disapproving of her job performance and 6 in 10 people saying she should resign or be removed from office. Now, you remember she's facing a new recall challenge that right now, whether or not that's going to move forward, we don't know. It's a pretty high bar to, you have to prove that she committed malfeasance or misfeasance, violated her oath of office for that to move forward. And then they would have to get like 70,000 some signatures of people saying they support a recall. And then it would go to the ballot ultimately. So there's quite a process still to play out. But this poll suggests that there may be an appetite for this moving forward, should it get to the point of collecting signatures for a recall. So we'll put up some of the results here from Change Washington. This was conducted very recently, August 13 through 17, finding just 22% of Seattle voters approving of Mayor Wilson's job performance, 66% disapproval, and then 12% said they weren't sure. This is interesting. Among Seattle Democrats, obviously, who put her in office, 60% disapprove of Wilson's performance, 28% approve. Among independents, 79% disapproving and 8% approving. And overall, 60% saying Wilson should resign or be removed from office. Interesting that among independents, the result was more striking that 76% said Wilson should resign or be removed, with only 13% disagreeing. So it is important to know there was another survey that came out from Fulcrum Strategy Group last week. And in that survey, they found two-thirds of Seattle voters not confident she's got an effective plan to improve public safety. So this was kind of a different type of poll. That survey was 500 Seattle voters, which was done just a few days before the Change Washington poll from August 10th through the 13th. 9% of voters in that survey said they were confident, and 25% somewhat confident that Wilson has an effective public safety plan. So that poll a little different, focusing on really public safety. Of course, she's been under a great amount of scrutiny since the bite of Seattle shooting, and then ultimately forcing the police chief to resign, giving him a big fat golden parachute on the way out the door. So a lot of pressure on her. Interesting poll results out today from Change Washington. And that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Quick tease on a story we're going to be putting up tomorrow, because there's a new public disclosure complaint that has been filed by KVI radio talk show host Ari Hoffman, alleging that the Seattle Times and some of their contributors, some of those donations were not reported ahead of the 2024 election for the Initiative 2117 that asked voters, do you want to repeal the Climate Commitment Act? Ultimately, voters chose not to do so, and that is still in place. And that's a large reason why our gas prices are among the very highest in the nation. But it's a very intense complaint, some public records that Ari Hoffman obtained, and we're going to be writing that up and talking about that in tomorrow's episode for certain. So now that's a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Wednesday. Hope you can get outside and enjoy the beautiful sunshine, and I hope you'll join us again on Thursday. And Ari Hoffman, as I mentioned in the opening, is also going after Seattle's Plymouth Housing. And he's asking labor and industries, and also asking federal officials to sort of investigate, concerns about workplace safety, to look into employees with Plymouth Housing and what they're exposed to on a daily basis. It's drug infested housing. I've been inside with Andrea Suarez and WeHeart Seattle on two different occasions. So I've seen with my own eyes some of the, pretty horrific conditions inside some of this housing. It's taxpayer funded housing. And it looks like it does in the parks downtown inside some of these resident units, where you've got, obviously drug debris, because these people that are provided taxpayer funded housing are not required to get clean, and sober. Of course, they are encouraged to do so. They've got taxpayer funded case managers that are trying to get these guys, um, in a better place. But the idea being give them a house first, get them off the street, and then maybe working with them over time. Trust can be earned, and they'll make a decision that they want to, get out of that life. But the idea with this complaint filed by Ari Hoffman, or not a complaint, I guess his request for labor and industries and federal OSHA officials to look into it, is that employees that work for Plymouth and the case managers shouldn't have to go into this environment and be exposed to fentanyl smoke and, human feces and needles laying on the ground inside, sometimes in the hallways of these units. So, this video I want to show you was inside a Plymouth Housing building. This was taken back in 2024, put up by Jonathan Cho and Discovery Institute. They went with WeHeart Seattle's Andrea Suarez to document the filth and drug contamination inside.
Oh my God.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Mike, who's in your room?
Drug use inside the rooms are a regular occurrence.
And this unit is a trap house. This is a garbage can full of foil, drugs, revolving door.
So does the staff here at Plymouth Housing, do they let you guys do drugs in here?
They don't say no, but they don't,
It's legal. This is a harm reduction place.
This is harm reduction?
Yeah, so they provide the paraphernalia, like the pipes and
They give you the pipes downstairs?
needles or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, the staff knows you guys are doing drugs in your room, right?
all right.
But nobody's intervening on your behalf, making you guys go to treatment.
No.
I want to remind you this is all related to the law enforcement assisted diversion program that we've been talking about a lot over the last week, which has come under intense scrutiny after Washington Policy Center's Eric Zimmerman came out with a report that basically said a lot of the success data metrics put out by the lead program are inaccurate and entirely misleading. They like to, put out a lot of information about how folks that are put into lead program diversion instead of into the criminal justice system, if they have a drug problem and have committed a crime related to the drug use, that instead that's really helping that they don't commit more felonies. Some of them get jobs. Some of them are successfully housed and moving, eventually out of the system. So WPC came out with that report that basically said a lot of their numbers are bogus. So that's related to all of this being exposed because a lot of those folks that are put through lead diversion end up in Plymouth Housing. So it's all connected, and there's a lot of pressure now on Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson over this and on the city council. And I will note that I've been trying for well over a week, specifically to get Seattle City Councilman Bob Kettle to respond. He chairs the Public Safety Committee, and he has been a proponent of the lead model for quite some time, despite people like Andrea Suarez and others showing up at city council meetings saying, this doesn't work. Why are we continuing to spend millions and millions of taxpayer dollars on a program that doesn't work? My colleague Randy Diamond, who covers the Seattle City Council and Seattle coverage in general, has been also trying and not successful in efforts to get Councilman Kettle and other members, as well as the mayor, to respond to this. And a new poll that was released today and commissioned by the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce suggests that Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson's favorability is declining. We've talked about a couple of other polls that have come out in the last several days. This one, and I just found this right before we're getting on for the podcast, so I have to read from this poll conducted by Fulcrum Strategy. So that was the same group that commissioned the Chamber's poll on Mayor Wilson's public safety plan or whether or not people support it. This time, it's all about the mayor's favorability overall, dropping sharply since April. In April, her favorability was about 57%. That number is now 37%. 20 percentage point decline in just 4 months for Mayor Wilson. And there is now a court date that is set for the recall challenge as well for a judge to review. Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, she told reporters yesterday she's not going to attend that hearing. Someone from the council would be there in her stead, and we plan to follow that very closely because that determines whether the recall gets to, in fact, move forward to the next phase. And finally, Washington's labor market maybe in a little bit of better shape. We got an update yesterday from the Employment Security Department, and they said 21,100 jobs, seasonally adjusted, were added in the month of July. And so the unemployment rate decreased slightly to 5%, down from 5.2%, which is one of the highest in the nation, to 5%. So encouraging. We got an update from Annalise Vance Sherman. She is the chief labor economist for the Employment Security Department.
One of the trends that's really been keeping the unemployment rate where it's been. So it's been increasing. It's been increasing very slowly and still staying in that 5% range. A lot of that is in response to the labor force itself. So the portion of people who either have a job or are actively seeking employment has been decreasing. Part of this is a result of retirements and aging workforce, as well as a number of other factors that might have people stepping out of the workforce. So, part of it is the number of unemployed, but part of it's also just what's happening under the surface. And that's been keeping the unemployment rate relatively low just because there's less competition for people that are looking for work. But when I look at that overall trend where we've been slowly increasing, but overall kind of hovering in that 4 to 5% range over the last couple of years, I also look over to the Economic and Revenue Forecast Council to see where we might expect that to go. Forecasts that they've been putting forward have really reflected a similar picture where there's not a strong expectation of a major increase or decrease in the unemployment rate, really kind of expecting that to hold steady in that general range for the foreseeable future. But overall, the fact that we're seeing it for the first time in a long time turn downward instead of upward is encouraging.
So, in their release that came out yesterday in conjunction with this little media avail they held, they said from July of 25 to July this year, the number of jobs in Washington overall increased by 16,100. They said private sector jobs collectively increased by 22,500. Public sector actually decreased by about 1,400 jobs. There have been some cuts to government jobs. So you can read into that what you will, and if that's a good thing or not, not my call to make. But overall, they paid out unemployment benefits to 61,013 people in the month of July. And what's going to be interesting to watch in the next couple of cycles, ESD puts out unemployment data every month. It's going to be interesting to see what the World Cup impact was because ESD was asked about that during the media avail yesterday, and they said absolutely. Some of those jobs added in the months of June and July were absolutely in leisure and hospitality. So you had a bunch of restaurants and bars and hotels that were hiring people to accommodate the influx of folks coming in for the FIFA matches that were held in the Seattle area. So going to be interesting to see if in fact then those people were just temp hires, if they keep their jobs, or if in fact that's going to just be a little blip and we'll get numbers that might not look so good again for the month of August.